The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy sat in their designated spots, their worried whispers filling the air. At the center of the chamber, High Counselor Reed, a tall blue-skinned alien with 4 arms, raised all his hands for silence. The quantum anomaly has grown another 12% since yesterday, he announced, his voice heavy with concern. Our best estimates suggest we have less than 30 days before it begins tearing apart inhabited systems. The chamber erupted in panic. Some representatives stood up, others shouted questions, and a few simply sat there, frozen in fear. The quantum anomaly had appeared 3 months ago, a strange tear in space that kept growing larger with each passing day. It consumed everything in its path: planets, stars, and even light itself. Professor Green, the head scientist of the council, stepped forward. His crystalline body reflected the chamber's lights as he moved to the central platform. The holographic display behind him showed the anomaly, a massive, swirling purple tear in the fabric of space. "We have tried everything," Professor Green said, his voice translated perfectly by the chamber systems. 47 different species have contributed their best scientific minds. We have run 10 million simulations. Nothing works. The anomaly defies all known laws of physics. A young aide rushed into the chamber, clutching a datapad in his hands. He whispered something to High Counselor Reed, whose eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean? You found something in the ancient archives?" Reed asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. The chamber fell silent. The aide, realizing all attention was now on him, cleared his throat nervously. We found records of a similar incident from 300 years ago. It was much smaller, but the pattern matches exactly." Professor Green grabbed the datapad, his crystalline fingers sliding across the screen. "This is impossible," he muttered. "According to this, the incident was solved by humans." The word hung in the air like a heavy weight. Everyone knew about humans. They were the mystery species, the ones who had voluntarily gone into cryo sleep 3 centuries ago after their last great war. Their entire population, all 15 billion of them, slept in massive cryo facilities scattered across their home system. "But the humans are sleeping," someone shouted from the crowd. "They chose to remove themselves from galactic affairs." High Counselor Reed studied the data carefully. The records show they dealt with quantum anomalies during their early experiments with faster-than-light travel. They found ways to control and eliminate them. Professor Green shook his head. Their science was primitive compared to ours. How could they possibly? "Primitive or not," Reed interrupted, "they succeeded where we are failing. The archives show multiple cases where humans solved problems that more advanced civilizations couldn't. They called it thinking outside the box, though no one has ever figured out what box they were talking about." The council chamber erupted in debate. Some argued that waking the humans was too dangerous. They were unpredictable, volatile. Others pointed out that facing extinction wasn't much of a choice. In the end, High Counselor Reed called for a vote. The results appeared on the massive screens. 82% in favor of waking the humans. "Then it's decided," Reed announced. "We will send a delegation to Earth immediately. Professor Green, gather all the data on the anomaly. We need to wake their leaders and scientists first." As the council members filed out of the chamber, Reed stared at the holographic display of the quantum anomaly. In just 30 days, it would start consuming populated worlds. They were about to wake up a species that had chosen to remove itself from galactic politics, hoping they could solve a problem that 47 other species couldn't. "May the stars help us all," he whispered, watching the purple tear in space pulse ominously in the hologram. "We're about to wake the humans." The human cryo facility on Mars was enormous. Its white walls stretched for miles across the red desert, housing millions of sleeping humans. High Counselor Reed stood before the main entrance with Professor Green and a team of medical experts from various species. "Are you sure about this pod number?" Professor Green asked, looking at the datapad. "Pod A137. Yes, Reed replied. According to the records, it contains Captain Tom Miller, one of their military leaders who also had a background in crisis management. The inside of the facility was cold and quiet. Rows of cryopods stretched as far as the eye could see, each containing a sleeping human. Their breath had created thin layers of frost on the pod windows, making them look like frozen ghosts. The medical team found pod A137 and began the wake-up process. Green lights blinked on the pod's control panel as ancient machinery hummed to life. Inside, a man with graying hair and a strong jaw began to stir. Captain Miller's eyes opened slowly. He blinked several times, looking confused at the collection of alien faces peering down at him. Then, to everyone's surprise, he smiled. "Well," he said, his voice rough from centuries of silence, "you folks certainly don't look human. How long was I out?" 300 years, Captain Miller, Reed answered. "And we need your help." The medical team helped Miller sit up. His muscles, kept healthy by the cryopod systems, worked perfectly. He stretched and yawned, as if waking from a regular nap. Not a 3-century sleep. 300 years. Miller whistled. "Missed a few birthdays, I guess. What's so important that you had to wake me up?" Professor Green projected a hologram of the quantum anomaly. Miller studied it with surprising calmness while Reed explained the situation. The aliens waited nervously for signs of panic or distress, but Miller just nodded and scratched his chin. "Looks like a Class 3 quantum tear," Miller said casually. "We used to get smaller ones during our early FTL tests. Had a whole team that dealt with these things." He looked around at the endless rows of pods. "You'll want to wake up Dr. Ann Cooper from pod C246. She was our best quantum physicist. And get Jack Stone from pod F891. He's an engineer, thinks differently than most folks. Good problem solver." The aliens stared at him in shock. "You're not concerned?" Professor Green asked. "This anomaly has defeated our best scientists. It's 50 times larger than anything in your records." Miller stood up and stretched again. "Bigger just means more interesting," he said. "Is there any coffee in this place? I haven't had a cup in 3 centuries. While the medical team went to wake Cooper and Stone, Miller walked around the facility, looking at the sleeping faces of his fellow humans. "You know," he said to Reed, "most folks think we went into cryo sleep because we were tired of fighting. Truth is, we did it because we needed time to think. Humanity had gotten too caught up in its own problems. We figured a nice long nap might give us some perspective." Dr. Cooper woke up much like Miller had, calm and ready to work. She was a short woman with clever eyes who immediately asked to see the anomaly data. Stone, a tall man with a mechanic's rough hands, woke up asking for a pencil and paper. Within an hour, the 3 humans sat in the facility's old conference room, drinking synthesized coffee and discussing the end of the universe as if they were planning a weekend project. Cooper drew diagrams on the walls while Stone calculated numbers on a napkin. Miller watched them work, occasionally offering suggestions. The aliens observed in confused silence. These humans had just woken up after 300 years, learned about a crisis that threatened all life, and their response was to drink coffee and draw on walls. "I think we've got something," Cooper announced, pointing to her wall drawings. "But you're not going to like it. It's not very elegant." Miller grinned. "The best human solutions rarely are," he said. "That's what makes them work." The Galactic Council's emergency meeting room fell silent as Dr. Cooper finished explaining her plan. The quiet lasted exactly 3 seconds before every alien in the room started shouting at once. "This is madness." Professor Green's crystalline form flashed with angry colors. "You want to create another quantum anomaly. On purpose." Cooper took a sip of her coffee, her 6th cup since waking up. "A controlled one, yes. Think of it like fighting fire with fire." "That's another human saying that makes no sense," one council member muttered. "Why would you fight fire with more fire?" Captain Miller leaned forward in his chair. Because sometimes the best way to stop a forest fire is to burn a line in front of it. Creates a gap the main fire can't cross. He grinned. We humans learned that one the hard way, like we learn most things. Engineer Stone spread out his drawings on the table. He'd been sketching on anything he could find. Napkins, paper, even the back of an alien report. His rough drawings showed a device that looked deceptively simple. We'll build what we call a quantum inverter, Stone explained, pointing to his sketches. It'll create a small, controlled tear in space, like a vaccine for the universe. A what? Several aliens asked at once. Never mind, Miller cut in. Just another human thing. The point is, we're going to make a tiny version of the big problem, but one we can control. When we set it off near the big anomaly, the two should cancel each other out. Professor Green's body had turned a pale, sickly color. The calculations, the risk factors. This is impossible, our computers say. Yeah, about that, Cooper interrupted, drawing a quick diagram on a screen. Your computers are too perfect. They only look for perfect solutions. Sometimes you need an imperfect solution to solve an imperfect problem. Stone nodded, still sketching. Humans are good at messy solutions. We've survived by being just a little bit crazy. Sometimes, the universe needs crazy. The council members watched in horror as Stone started listing the materials they'd need. Most of them were common enough, but the way he planned to use them violated at least 30 different galactic safety protocols. We'll need some of our old human tech too, Cooper added. The stuff in storage from before we went to sleep. It's not as advanced as your gear, but it's got something your machines don't. What's that? Reed asked. Miller answered with a smile. Human error tolerance. Our machines were built to work even when things went wrong. They don't crash when things get weird. They adapt. Stone held up his completed sketch. This part here, he pointed to a central component. We used to call it the hope and pray circuit. Because sometimes you just had to build something, hope it worked, and pray it didn't explode too badly when it failed. The aliens stared at him in horror when it failed. You built things expecting them to fail. Of course, Cooper said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Best way to learn is to fail. Humans are really good at failing. We just keep failing until we succeed. Miller stood up and walked to the room's window, looking out at the stars. That's why we went to sleep, you know. We needed to fail less catastrophically for a while. But now, he turned back to face the room. Now the universe needs people who know how to fail properly. It needs humans. Reed looked at the other council members, then at the three humans who seemed so impossibly calm about their insane plan. You really think this will work? Nope, Miller said cheerfully. We think it might work. And right now, might is better than nothing. Cooper gathered up Stone's drawings. We'll need to wake up a few more humans. We need someone good with explosives, a pilot crazy enough to fly into a quantum anomaly, and maybe someone who really understands how to break computers in just the right way. Break computers. Professor Green sounded faint. On purpose. Trust us, Miller said, finishing his coffee. Sometimes you need to break things to fix them. That's the human way. The Galactic Council's science lab had never seen anything quite like Dr. Cooper's presentation. She stood in front of a giant whiteboard she'd requested, covered in what the aliens considered crude mathematical formulas. Empty coffee cups littered her workspace, and she'd rolled up her sleeves like she was about to get into a fight with physics itself. Okay, here's the thing about quantum anomalies, Cooper said, drawing a rough circle on the board. Everyone thinks they're complicated, but they're actually simple in a really complicated way. Professor Green's crystalline form flickered with confusion. That statement contradicts itself. Welcome to human science, Captain Miller said from his corner, where he was helping Engineer Stone sort through old human technology he'd retrieved from storage. Cooper drew more circles, connecting them with lines. During our first faster-than-light experiments, we created dozens of these tiers in space, small ones, but still dangerous. We lost 3 research stations before we figured it out." The alien scientists murmured in shock. "You lost entire stations. And you continued the experiments." "Of course," Cooper said, adding numbers to her diagram. "That's how we learned. Look here, when a quantum anomaly forms, it follows a pattern. Not a logical one, but a natural one, like a river finding its path downhill." She stepped back from the board, which was now covered in calculations that made the alien scientists' heads hurt. It wasn't that the math was advanced. It was the opposite. It seemed too simple, too rough, too human. "Your computers can't solve this problem," Cooper explained, "because they're looking for a perfect mathematical solution. But quantum anomalies aren't perfect. They're messy, like nature, like humans." Stone walked over with an old device in his hands. It looked like it had been repaired dozens of times, with parts that didn't quite match. "This is from our early quantum experiments," he said. "We called it the Murphy device, because if anything could go wrong with it, it would. But that's what made it perfect for quantum research." "I don't understand," Professor Green said. "How does something's tendency to fail make it perfect?" Miller laughed. "Because quantum mechanics doesn't play by normal rules. Sometimes you need something that can break in just the right way to understand how to fix things." Cooper pointed to a specific part of her calculations. "Look here. When we create our controlled anomaly, it won't behave perfectly. It'll be unstable, chaotic, and probably a little bit dangerous, just like the big one we're trying to stop." "And that's good?" one of the alien scientists asked. "That's perfect," Cooper said with a grin. "Because quantum anomalies are like bullies. They don't respect perfect behavior. They respect things that can be just as chaotic as they are." Stone held up the Murphy device. "We'll use this as a template for our quantum inverter. We'll build it with your advanced materials, but we'll build it the human way. A little bit rough, a little bit ready to fail, but in exactly the right way." "The secret," Cooper continued, circling a section of her equations, "isn't to try to close the anomaly. That's impossible. The secret is to give it something it wants to fight with, something just as messy as it is. When 2 quantum anomalies meet, they don't add together. They try to cancel each other out." Miller walked to the whiteboard and added his own small diagram. "Think of it like 2 waves in the ocean meeting. They either make a bigger wave or they cancel each other out. We're betting on cancellation." "You're betting." Professor Green's color paled. "The fate of the galaxy depends on a bet." "That's how humans discovered most things," Cooper said, starting a new set of calculations. "We make educated guesses, we take calculated risks, and most importantly, we're really good at being slightly out of control in exactly the right way." Stone patted the Murphy device. "Sometimes the best way to fight chaos is with careful chaos, and nobody does careful chaos better than humans." The Galactic Council's main hangar had turned into what Captain Miller called organized chaos. 3 more humans had joined the team. Rob White, an explosives expert with wild gray hair and a constant smile. Mary Anderson, a deep space pilot who'd already started modifying an alien ship to her liking. And Dave Harris, a quantum computer specialist who kept taking alien computers apart and putting them back together with improvements. "Stop touching that," Professor Green shouted as Harris opened another computer panel. "That's sensitive equipment." "Not sensitive enough," Harris replied, connecting wires that definitely weren't meant to be connected. "We needed to be less stable. Perfect computers can't handle quantum chaos." Nearby, White and Stone were working on the quantum inverter. The device looked nothing like the elegant machines the aliens were used to. It was a mix of ancient human technology and advanced alien materials, held together with what White called hope, physics, and a bit of good old duct tape. "What is this duct tape material?" an alien engineer asked, scanning the silver strips. "Our records show no such element." "That's because it's not an element," White laughed. "It's human ingenuity in sticky form. Trust me, Half the universe should be held together with this stuff. In the center of the hangar, Anderson was teaching alien mechanics how to modify their ship's safety protocols. The aliens watched in horror as she disabled multiple automated systems. But the AI is meant to prevent dangerous maneuvers, one mechanic protested. Exactly, Anderson said, ripping out another safety circuit. And where we're going, everything is going to be a dangerous maneuver. We need this ship to do what I tell it, not what it thinks is safe. Dr. Cooper walked through the chaos with a tablet, checking everyone's progress. She stopped by Miller, who was coordinating the whole operation. The aliens still think we're crazy, she said quietly. Miller nodded. We are crazy, but it's the right kind of crazy. How's the quantum mapping going? Cooper showed him her calculations. I've plotted the best approach vector. We'll need to get within 500 kilometers of the anomaly's edge. Any closer and we risk immediate destruction. Any further and our inverter won't have enough effect. 500 kilometers, Miller whistled. That's cutting it close. That's why we woke up Mary, Cooper grinned. She's the only pilot I know crazy enough to dance with a quantum anomaly. Across the hangar, White called everyone over. The quantum inverter was ready for its first test. The device hummed with power, a combination of alien energy cells and human engineering creating something entirely new. Everyone stand back, White warned. This either creates a tiny controlled quantum tear or, well, let's focus on the first option. The aliens cleared the area quickly, but the humans gathered closer. Harris had his modified computers ready to take readings. Cooper held her breath. Miller just smiled. White pressed the activation switch. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, in the air above the device, a small purple tear appeared, just like the massive one threatening the galaxy, but only the size of a dinner plate. It works, Cooper shouted, checking the readings. The quantum signature matches exactly. Of course it works, White said, adjusting some controls. We built it to break the universe in exactly the right way. Professor Green approached cautiously, his crystalline form reflecting the purple light of the mini-anomaly. I still don't understand how you can all be so casual about this. You're tearing holes in space-time. Sometimes you have to break something to fix it, Miller said, watching the small tear pulse gently. Humans learned that lesson a long time ago. Now we just need to break something very big in exactly the right way. Anderson walked over from her modified ship. The navigation's ready. All safety protocols are disabled. We can fly straight into hell if we need to. We probably will need to, Cooper said, studying the readings. The big anomaly's growth rate is increasing. We have less than 10 days now. Miller looked at his team of awakened humans, each one ready to do something impossibly dangerous to save a galaxy of aliens they barely knew. Well then, he said with a grin, let's go break the universe. Carefully. The modified alien ship hung in space, its sleek lines now broken by what Engineer Stone called human improvements. Through the main viewport, the quantum anomaly filled half the sky. A massive purple tear in space that seemed to swallow light itself. Well, that's definitely bigger than anything we dealt with back home, Pilot Anderson said from the control seat. She'd removed most of the ship's automated controls, replacing them with manual interfaces that the aliens considered dangerously primitive. Size doesn't matter, Cooper replied, checking her readings. The physics are the same, just more of them. Captain Miller stood at the back of the bridge, watching his team work. White and Stone were making final adjustments to the quantum inverter, which took up most of the ship's cargo bay. Harris had turned the ship's computer systems into something that made the alien engineers cover their eyes in horror. Ready for initial approach, Anderson announced. Professor Green, you might want to hold onto something. This is going to get bumpy. The crystalline alien grabbed a support rail. Why will it get bumpy? Space is smooth. Not where we're going, Anderson grinned, pushing the engines to full power. The ship shot forward, diving straight toward the anomaly's edge. The first wave of quantum distortion hit them like a storm. The ship shuddered, instruments flickered, and warning alarms screamed from every panel. Anderson's hands flew over the controls, adjusting their course manually. "Impossible," Green shouted. "These distortions don't match any known patterns." "Known patterns are overrated," Anderson replied, spinning the ship through another wave. "Sometimes you have to feel the dance." In the cargo bay, White and Stone worked on the inverter. The device hummed dangerously, its parts glowing with barely contained energy. "How's our baby doing?" Miller called over the intercom. "She's angry and ready to cause trouble," White answered, patting the machine. "Just like a proper human invention should be." Cooper's voice cut through the chaos. "We're approaching the 500-kilometer mark. Mary, hold us steady if you can." "Steady is relative when space-time is having a breakdown," Anderson replied, but she managed to stabilize their position relative to the anomaly's edge. The view through the viewport was terrifying. The purple tear seemed alive, pulsing with energy that made reality itself bend and twist. Small objects, asteroids and space debris, were being pulled in and simply ceasing to exist. "Running final calculations," Cooper announced. She turned to Miller. "Tom, this next part, it's going to be close. If the inverter works, it'll create a cascade effect. We'll have about 30 seconds to get clear before both anomalies collapse." "And if it doesn't work?" Green asked nervously. "Then we won't have to worry about it for very long," Miller replied cheerfully. "Rob, Jack, start the activation sequence." In the cargo bay, White and Stone began powering up the inverter. The ship's lights dimmed as the device drew massive amounts of energy. "Harris," Miller called, "how are those modified computers holding up?" "They're terrified but functioning," Harris replied from his station. "Just like us." The inverter's hum grew louder, rising to a pitch that made everyone's teeth rattle. Through the viewport, they could see small purple tears beginning to form around their ship. Tiny mirrors of the massive anomaly they faced. "This is either going to be really impressive or really tragic," Anderson said, her hand steady on the controls. "Either way, it'll be one hell of a story." "That's humanity for you," Miller said, watching the small tears grow and merge. "We either fix things spectacularly or break them magnificently. No in between." Cooper's instruments suddenly lit up. "Energy readings are maxing out. Rob, Jack, it's now or never." White's voice came over the intercom, excitement clear in his tone. "Fire in the hole." The quantum inverter activated with a sound that wasn't quite a sound, more like reality itself clearing its throat. The small tears around their ship suddenly merged into one, growing rapidly to face the massive anomaly like David facing Goliath. "Here we go," Miller said quietly. "Time to show the universe how humans fix things." The universe seemed to hold its breath as the two quantum anomalies faced each other. The massive, galaxy-threatening tear on one side, and the human-made controlled tear on the other. For a moment, nothing happened. "Did it fail?" Professor Green whispered, his crystalline form dimmed with worry. "Just wait," Cooper said, watching her instruments. "Sometimes the best part of the show takes a moment to." She never finished her sentence. The two anomalies suddenly pulled toward each other like magnets snapping together. The ship rocked violently as space itself twisted around them. "Hold on to something," Anderson shouted, her hands flying over the controls. "This ride's about to get interesting." The view through the viewport was impossible to describe. Purple energy cascaded between the two anomalies, reality bending and warping in ways that made everyone's eyes hurt. The ship's hull creaked under forces it was never designed to handle. "Cooper," Miller called out. "What's happening?" "Exactly what we wanted," she shouted back, excitement clear in her voice. "The anomalies are fighting each other. The quantum signatures are." "Wait." She stared at her readings in surprise. "They're not just canceling out. They're doing something else." White's voice crackled over the intercom from the cargo bay. "The inverter's going crazy down here. It's like it's having a conversation with the big one." The ship shuddered again as a wave of energy passed through it. Harris's modified computers were displaying readings that made no sense, numbers and patterns that shouldn't have been possible. "Mary," Miller shouted, "get us out of here." "Working on it," Anderson replied through gritted teeth. She yanked the controls hard, fighting against forces that wanted to tear the ship apart. But space isn't exactly cooperating right now. Through the viewport, they watched as something extraordinary happened. The two quantum tiers weren't just fighting. They were dancing. Streams of purple energy flowed between them, creating patterns that looked almost beautiful. "This is incredible," Cooper said, studying her readings. "The anomalies aren't destroying each other. They're stabilizing each other. The chaos in one is perfectly balancing the chaos in the other." "You mean we accidentally found a better solution than destroying them?" Professor Green asked in disbelief. "That's the human way," Miller laughed. "We try to break something and end up fixing it in a way nobody expected." The ship finally broke free of the gravitational forces, and Anderson steered them to a safe distance. The crew watched in awe as the two anomalies continued their cosmic dance, slowly shrinking and becoming more stable. "Final readings coming in," Cooper announced. "Both anomalies are losing power. They're going to collapse, but slowly and safely. No explosion, no destruction. Just a gentle fade-out. Like a cosmic happy ending," White said, joining them on the bridge. He was covered in grease and smiling widely. "The inverter's toast, by the way, gave its life for the cause." Miller looked at Professor Green. "So, what do you think? Did we solve your problem?" The alien scientist's crystalline form flickered with multiple colors, their equivalent of being speechless. "You didn't just solve it. You turned it into something completely different. This isn't in any of our scientific models." "That's because your models don't account for human chaos theory," Cooper said with a grin. "Sometimes the best solution isn't to fight chaos with order, but to fight it with just the right kind of chaos." As they watched, the last traces of purple energy faded from space, leaving behind nothing but stars. The threat was gone, transformed by human ingenuity and what Miller liked to call educated recklessness. "So," Anderson said from the pilot's seat, "should we head back and wake up the rest of humanity? Seems like the galaxy could use a little more of our brand of problem-solving." Miller looked at Professor Green, who was still staring at the now empty space where the anomalies had been. "What do you say, Professor? Is the galaxy ready for more humans?" Green's form shifted to a bright, clear color, a sign of joy and acceptance. "After what I've seen today, I think the galaxy needs humans more than it realizes. Your chaos, it brings its own kind of order." "That," Miller said with a smile, "might be the best description of humanity I've ever heard."